So we're finally at the part where we can write to the MySQL table with PHP. Now that we have everything set up, our table made, our forms made, the connection string all set up. So now we actually get to write the SQL statement that writes to the table. If you haven't done the other steps yet, I would recommend that. I'll be putting the links in the description. Okay, so like I said, we already have our form made. We are checking to make sure that it's not empty. We're collecting errors in this variable, and we already have our connection string set up to connect to our Workbench table. So now it's time to actually add the code to our PHP to write to the database. Now we have it set up already where we have an if statement where it'll only do a section if there are no errors. Otherwise, we're going to write the errors. We do have a temporary spot where I was just writing the name, email, and password to the screen just for testing, but now at this point I'm going to delete that. And this is where we will be adding our database writing code. So if there are no errors, the first thing we're going to do is write our query. And so that is actually an SQL query, and it's going to be stored in a variable called Q. And since I can't talk and type at the same time, I'm going to go ahead and type it and then describe what this is about. Okay, so this first line, I'm writing the query, and that query is an insert statement. So I'm going to say insert into users. Users is the name of the table that I created in Workbench. I'm choosing the field names I would like to write into, and those are name, email, and pass. These need to match exactly to what I have set up in Workbench. So just to verify, my table name is users, and I have name, email, and pass. Then I write the word values, and in single quotes, because that needs to be part of my query string, I'm going to be taking the value from the name variable, the email variable, and the pass variable, which is the password. And those need to match exactly also. So that's coming from here, here, and here. In the end, this whole thing is surrounded by double quotes, and I do need a semicolon at the end. The next thing that's going to happen is that I will run the query. And these comments aren't required. I'm just putting them in so you can see what's going on. And what this is doing, it's going to be running the query. This is the connection string we set up before. Notice DBC equals. So this is going to be containing the host, the user, the password, the database name, and that's here. And this is the query that we just wrote. The result of that is going to go into this R variable. Now at this point, I can go ahead and close my database connection. Now let's check and see if it worked or not. So I'm going to be checking the value of R to see if it ran or not. So if it ran properly, I'm going to echo a message to the user, and then I'm going to hide the form that was there. And to do that, I'm going to be using a command called exit, and that essentially quits the script right there. So none of the HTML will continue. So I need to close out my body and HTML tags, and then I'm going to exit. So this will hide the form. And then an else, if this query did not run properly, if there was an error, it will go to this else. And I want to point out that this whole thing here with an if statement is inside of this other if statement. So indenting, while not required for the program, it's a really good idea to stay indented properly so you know what's going on. Because sometimes there's a lot of closing and opening curly braces, and it's tough to see what's going on. So once again, we've got our form down here. It will check for errors here and load values into the variables. If there are no errors, it will write into the database. And if there's no errors there, it'll say, hey, everything was great. Otherwise, it'll give us an error and say that there was a database error. And if there were, like if somebody didn't enter anything into a form, it will echo those errors. So let's try it out. I'm going to go ahead and save it and let's run it. Let's sign Jeff up. And when I hit submit, it says you have been registered. Now we can't take this page's word for it. Let's go check the MySQL database table to see if he is registered. Now if I go to this, if I leave up my table, I can just click on this little refresh icon and it should check. And there it is. My 5th record is jeff@pinball.com play. And because I set this user ID up as auto increment, I don't need to enter this. If you didn't set that up, you would need to consider that when you are writing your query. Now let's say let's click back. If I didn't enter something and I hit submit, it'll say you didn't enter your name, but it's not trying to write to the database yet. So let me see refresh. Notice there's nothing yet. Let me enter something else. Okay, he's been registered. And refresh. And so that's how to use a PHP form to write to a MySQL database. In future videos, I will show how to display this to a page as well as change this password. Once again, don't actually write real passwords in here. This is just for demonstration. And in a later video, I'll show how to encrypt it so you aren't just using plain text. So this is just a demonstration.